Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Later on, we're going to talk about, is there a way for Republicans to win, in the urban areas? But first, you know them, you don't like them, you barely respect them. Michael Brown from KOA, good to see you.
Good to see you, John.
All right, I thought, since I really want to talk about my experiences on talk radio, I'd have you on as a foil, just so we could talk about talk radio.
Right, sure, all right.
You've now moved from KHOW,
right,
where I still do mostly fill-in work, to the big ship, KOA.
Right. Which, by the way, where you're officially my substitute guest host.
Yeah, always a bridesmaid, never a bride.
But you're on the big ship now, too.
I used to be on the big ship all night long when you were in bed. I got corporately downsized. I've always been actually amazed how KOA, with that 50,000 watts, back when I had the 10 o'clock to 1.
Right.
What I loved about that shift was management was asleep.
Right.
So, they left us alone.
Right.
And you're talking to 38 states.
38 states.
It was great. There were freak jobs all over the nation up that late.
Most people don't know that KOA is one of the legacy radio stations in the country. It's called a clear channel. In fact, that used to be the name of the company, right? It's a clear channel, which means that nobody can interfere with that signal at night. So that signal, a 50,000 watt blowtorch, as they refer to it, is heard in 38 states, 2 countries. So at night, while we still focus on, obviously, ratings within the Denver market, we also recognize that in terms of a return on investment for an advertiser, you're heard in 38 states now.
Yeah, and I love doing that because I get calls from Saskatchewan.
Right,
and
exactly.
And it was a lot of fun. What people might not know is that at night, the other stations have to power down.
They have to power down.
And most of them are only at 5,000, and then get shot down to like 1,000.
Right.
So there are baby monitors. What I loved about it is I would get calls from Chicago.
Yes.
And there's an 850 station there, and it just blows them
out of the water.
Poor guy.
I talked to a Chicago cop one night that had been at the 1968 Democrat National Convention. Talk about a fascinating conversation. Tell me the truth. Did Daley really send you into the streets? Did you really get urine thrown at you? No. Oh, he had great stories. Yeah,
and also, since only geriatrics listen to talk radio, I would have great conversation, or do talk radio. I had great conversations with people who had connections with old stars too, who could tell you real stories. Anyway,
but before I can't let that point go without countering it, because when you look,
you're not geriatric.
Not geriatric, and what we have found is that there is in the younger demos, the 18 to 34 and the 34 to 54, that there is still a strong presence in that. They just consume it a different way. They're not listening on the radio, they're listening on that device. They're listening with an earplug in their ear. So radio is not anywhere near dead what people think it is.
Well, all right, let me talk about that specifically with talk radio. One of the things I've loved about talk radio, what I still love about talk radio, is that unlike NPR, unlike news media, unlike everything else, unlike this, it is two-way conversation.
Right.
So you say something really stupid or wrong, some truck driver picks up his phone in his cab and is instantly confronting you, which is one of the reasons why I think leftist talk radio never worked.
And what we've done to adapt to the different way people consume now is that truck driver doesn't have to pick up his phone and call me. They can now, if they're watching on Facebook or YouTube, or they're listening on Twitter, or we have a text message service where they can just text the word Mike to 56690, and just like they're talking to their wife, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, hey, you dumb schmuck, I can't believe you said that. I love it.
Right. Although the difference is, and this is the part that I think I'm going to miss, you're saying young people listen to it through that.
Yeah.
Some of them are listening live.
Right.
But more and more, they're listening after the fact. And so those wonderful fights that you could get on, they're still there. It's still great. But it's not quite the way it used to be, where people tuned in at that time. I'm trying to explain this to my kid. No, we wanted to watch that show. We had to be in front of the TV when it happened.
No more.
And that's when they would pick up the phone. So I missed that part, although it's been replaced by, as you said, kind of a delayed part of that where the conversation goes on.
They time shift radio just like they do television. And so I've been back on KOA now for the full 4 hours for 6 weeks. and my digital numbers have gone through the roof. And in fact, the trend line, if it continues, I will be the #1 podcaster, the #1 digital person in that building. And you think I'm competing against the FM rock stations, I'm competing against the party, I'm competing against sports. The numbers are going through the roof. I love it.
Not that you're proud. Not that you're boastful.
Did I mention that those numbers are through the roof?
I didn't. Yeah, it's a leaky roof. I've been there.
Right.
So the other part about talk radio that I think is needed now more than ever is that it can be hyper local. That, I mean, I get it. We talk about DC. Everybody loves DC. But the government that affects most people, the issues that affect most people, are your local government. It's the government down the street. It's Polis now. It's the legislature, and that doesn't get coverage as much. And now that newspapers are dying
or dead,
it's hard to get those. It's hard to get that there. Talk radio fills a lot of that void.
Well, it's funny you say that because last night I spent an entire segment trying to look, I think presidential elections are important. I think senatorial and congressional elections are important. But I told people last night that if you really, truly want to make a difference in the direction of the country, sure, go vote in those elections, go participate. But instead, start with dog catcher. Start with your city council. Start with your county commissioner. Start with your state and local reps. Focus on those elections because that's where the rubber meets the road.
And that's the stuff you can do in talk radio.
Right.
All right. Then let me flip the coin here and ask you some of the other questions. We got to be honest. I don't think talk radio is as potent as it used to be. Maybe you've gotten great numbers online, but you know there was a time when Mike Rosen and Pete Boyles, you know, they dominated not just talk radio, they dominated airwaves, and they could force a conversation that then the Post, that used to be a newspaper, and the Rocky Mountain News have to cover. You know, and that I think is missing. And that there's so many different options, from podcasts all over the world to local websites. I see, I don't want to say audience, but I see the impact of talk radio kind of doing this. And maybe I'm wrong on that. Well, I want to be wrong on that.
Here's my take on it. I think the take is guys like you and me, I mean, you're so much older than I am, but guys guys like you and I don't recognize the power that those devices have. And so what we have to do in radio—
devices being smartphones.
The smartphones, tablets, whatever it is, the laptop, people time shifting everything. What we have to recognize is that the power of radio is still there. It's just been diffused a little bit. Because when you look at the actual audience numbers, what we call CUME, that CUME is still as big as it's ever been. It's just that the people that listen today, sure, you have the activists, but you also still have the people who are truly tuning in. And I'm kind of, again, being boastful, I pride myself on just giving people, you heard this in the news today, maybe here's a different way to think about it. And if I can just get people to take whatever the hot button issue is and give them a perspective of a life of having spent time in DC, spent my entire time in politics, give them just a different way to think about things, that I don't see the immediate effect of that. Now, last night, there was a story about, we have 3 nominees for the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals that, for whatever reason, President Trump has not renominated these 3. I happen to know one of the guys personally. He's a Filipino-American. He's a young, smart, gay person. And now we are kowtowing to Feinstein and Harris and not taking this chance to remake the 9th Circuit, the most liberal circuit, the most overturned circuit in the entire country. So I last night just suggested to people, gave out the comment line for the White House, and said, why don't you just call and leave a comment? Here are the 3 names, and just the comment is, Mr. President, renominate these people and don't negotiate with Harris and Feinstein. And everything blew up. You can still have an impact.
Let me hit you with this one, because I want to be negative Nancy on this. There's also the corporate side of this. I remember, there's the reaction I was looking for. All right, when I got into radio, and I've been doing it longer because, as you said, I'm much older than you. when I started doing radio 20 years ago, just fill-in stuff.
Right.
You know, it was J-Core, which then turned into something else, which then turned into something else.
Right.
And it became a corporate entity, and that corporate, well, it was a corporate entity, but it got owned by venture capitalists. They overextended.
Right.
And then, just like newspapers, the cutting happened. And I know we're not supposed to talk about this, so I hope our bosses aren't listening. But, you know, the layoffs and the layoffs and the layoffs and the layoffs, and that fewer people trying to cover, you know, when you've got guys in, you know, Detroit, phoning in the traffic reports here. They can't pronounce Vasquez. Well, down in Louisville.
Louisville. That's right. Up in Louisville.
You know that it's going. And the other part of it, I remember for a fraction of a minute, they had a campaign called Less is More, where they were actually going to give more airtime to content and jack up the prices.
Supply and demand.
Right. And now they figured out that more is more. And unlike public radio, unlike most podcasts, there are a lot of interruptions to the content of talk radio.
Absolutely. Now, the good news is, and you know this as well as I do, the company's gone through a Chapter 11 reorganization. So they've realigned the debt structure with the operating income. So they did what airlines do, and I say good for them. I actually was in a meeting with the company president and raised my stupid hand, as I'm prone to do, and said, why didn't we do this 6 or 7 years ago? But they've at least done that. The other good news is I've changed my clock. I've got a really good program director, so that what we do
what
is...
a suck-up you are. God almighty.
He's not listening. He's not watching this. He's asleep.
No, he lives for this. All right.
And we've changed the clock for that very reason, because we have found that the typical clock like you use on KHOW, you talk for 8 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and then you go for 10 minutes of breaks. Instead, what we're doing is we're doing an hourglass. So you get, you know from doing my show, you get 22 minutes, and then at the bottom of the hour, there's live news, there's live traffic, there's live weather, and then there's some spots for about 10 minutes. But it gives you 40-some minutes of talk time as opposed to about 32 minutes of talk time. So we've recognized that.
Everything's okay. Nothing to see here. All right.
No, because I think if radio doesn't continue to pay attention to the trends of how it's consumed and using the digital platforms we have available.
Does corporate care as much about talk radio as it does about FMs and music? My sense is talk radio is the stepchild, the redheaded stepchild in terrestrial radio.
With one exception. Here's why they still like talk radio. Revenue.
What kind of revenue?
Let's put it this way. When I started my contract negotiations for the new program and on the new station, it became clear to me that KOA AM in this cluster is the #1 priority.
Say more about that. So a cluster is that they're allowed to own 8 stations. iHeartMedia owns 8 stations in this market.
They got
5 FMs, 3 AMs.
Yes, and so they've got all of these stations, and now we're in regions. So when I talk about this cluster, I'm really talking about Colorado Springs, Pueblo, Fort Collins, Cheyenne, Ogallala. That's all in this cluster, so to speak. And my concern was, am I making a move just to make a move? Why am I making the move? I had concerns about where the direction of one station was going versus where another station is going, and it was like, yes, this is the top priority.
Very interesting. All right, have me on sometime. Congratulations.
You're on.
You were on that. I was in that slot. You're going down. You're going down.
You're on. Quit griping.
I fill in for you. You're out of there. You know that.
And by the way, I'm not in rehab when I'm gone either.
I've never suggested anything.
You suggested that every single time.
I got
and people love it. People love it.
So I bash him a lot. And so
a little.
I said, well, he's still in rehab right now. And I got this sweet lady called. Oh, you shouldn't make fun of Michael that way. It's a real struggle.
Yeah, and the sad part is she didn't ask if I was okay. Just don't make fun of me.
I gotta run. Stay tuned.